Hi everyone, this is Corinne. Sorry, I was having technical issues and I figured out how to do this. Okay, so now I'm gonna find my friend. Okay, so we're gonna go to. All right, so I'm gonna add my friend. I'm waiting. Yes!
We're
It
live.
worked! We're live!
Yeah.
Oh my
So,
God, technical difficulties.
yeah. Sorry, everybody, but we're here. We're
We're
queer. We're
here.
live.
Welcome to the Infinite Love Show. My name's Corinne, and I am here to share with my friends all the things that we love and our passions and what we bring into the world. My name's Corinne. I'm the owner of Pelvis Wellness. I'm an intuitive acupuncture and an energy medicine practitioner, and I love what I do, and I love helping people be their best selves. And so I'm here with my friend Teikōa, who's going to talk to us about anti-racism and his passions in the world and what he's presenting and how he loves what he does and how he wants to spread his message to the world.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I was debating. So I was debating on how I wanted to start this, and I think what I first want to do is I want to address the white audience who's on this live now, and I want to acknowledge that racism requires white people to do nothing, whereas anti-racism, requires action, and it can make white people feel unsettled and uncomfortable. And so, if you're white and you feel uncomfortable at any point on this live, I think what I'd like you to do is to sit in that uncomfortableness and push through, push through like you would any other yoga class, any Pilates class. And you're cutting off. Sorry, you still there? Uh,
Yeah, I'm
oh,
still there. I was getting a phone call. I guess I should turn off my phone.
okay, no
You get
worries.
calls when this is happening. And of course, it's my
Oh yeah,
mama that's calling me.
so yeah. So anyway, did you hear all of that? I'm not sure if that came through.
I heard I heard what you were saying about white people that are on the call to breathe into it like a yoga pose.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So anyway, so with that said, hi everyone. My name is Teikōa. I'm an independent racing class researcher, scholar, and writer, and my passion is anti-racism. And so, for those who don't know what that means, anti-racism is essentially the work that heightens your awareness surrounding racial inequalities, not only on the systemic level, but on education, economic, political, but also on the individual and personal level. And so my work focuses on race and class in the U.S. by examining, drumroll, white supremacy. So yeah, so white supremacy. So capitalism, whiteness, and white people. And so I use the following lens of historical, sociological, and discourse analysis. And so what that means is that I trace historical choices from the past into the present. I illuminate how we receive racist messaging from our institutions, like the media, for example,
Hmm.
and I articulate how that racist messaging manifests as a bias. How it manifests casually in everyday conversation as bias. So yeah. So I hope that gives you a good summary of what it is I do and what my passion is.
Okay, great. Well, I'm so curious on how you started to do this work and why you found it was so important for it to become your lifelong passion and what was your experiences growing up that illuminated you to this path?
Yeah, so I was been thinking about this recently, and so I can't, it's not just one individual. It's been like a lifetime of racial bias that I've experienced,
Hmm.
and so yeah, so it's because of those racial biases that I'm at where I'm at, and I'll probably talk a lot about my relationship to my white husband on this live, because everything, all the experiences that I've had, the racial biases that I've experienced were amplified after I coupled up with my white boyfriend at the time, and
Hmm.
especially after I moved in with him, because at that time I didn't know it, but not only was I moving in with my white boyfriend, but I was moving into his white world, his predominantly white world, and so and everything that means. Um, and so yeah, so it's not just one thing that has led me to anti-racism, but being surrounded.
What just happened? Are you there?
Yeah, still here.
Okay, I don't know what just happened. It said poor connection.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
that's okay. Yeah, it's challenging. Yeah, I know many other people were dealing with the same thing. So,
At least
um,
we're not doing a singing duel. Remember what happened with Babyface?
yeah.
That was
so,
terrible.
so yeah, so where, yeah, did you? Sorry, I'm just like not sure how much of that you heard.
I
If
heard
I,
that I heard that you were when you were living with your white boyfriend at the time, that's when you really started to understand.
yeah, yeah. So it's again, as I was saying, the racial biases that I've experienced were amplified after I moved in with my white boyfriend and moved into his
Hmm.
white world. And so it's I have an I have an intimate understanding of how oppressive whiteness can be,
Hmm.
because and what I mean by whiteness, by the way, whiteness is essentially the way I articulate it is it's the social conditioning that or the socialized characteristics of that are that white people are inculcated in. So
Hmm.
yeah, but again, it wasn't just like one singular incident.
Right.
It's been a plethora, a smorgasbord, if you will, of just experiences where I was left feeling like, wait a minute, like this isn't normal. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I mean, as a person of color, like I feel like, or people of color, we all kind of go through this our whole lives where we get multitude of mini traumas
yes,
that are just so racially focused. And a lot of times we don't even, I feel like I've had situations where I have to question myself. I'm like, was that racist? Like, what just happened there?
right.
And, but not everyone makes a decision that you made to actually make this your life's work. So, was
Yeah,
there like a pivotal moment where you were like, this has happened to me so many times, I'm done. So, instead of being a victim to it, I'm going to be a
yeah,
leader and start activating others to change?
yeah, yeah. That's a great question. That's a great question. I'd say so. So again, my boyfriend and I, or my husband now, met back in 2006. Uh, I I moved in 2 months into the relationship, which was
Hmm.
pretty fast. Uh, but it wasn't until 2013 uh, where I experienced the what I call the New Orleans incident, and that was an
Hmm.
incident where we went to New Orleans to celebrate a friend's birthday, 40th birthday celebration, and I was one of three. I was one of three people within that group. Everybody else were the group was virtually all white, and so uh, anyway, flash forward to all of us being on street in New Orleans, and I was engaged in a conversation with one of four people within that group, and one of the men within that group, I'll call him Connor, walks behind me. And keep in mind, by the way, that I've had previous experiences with him, and he made it clear from the get-go that he just did not like me. Not,
Right.
I mean, I don't know why, but anyway, so Connor walks behind me, and then all of a sudden I hear him spit out the water that he was drinking from his bottle. And that spit water hit the back of my neck and my entire upper back. And so I was just paralyzed. I was mortified because I just could not believe that this guy essentially attacked me like that. Like, I was like, damn, I knew you didn't like me, but holy, you just made it 10 times clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what's interesting though is that I can argue back and forth with white people about whether or not that was intentional. But
Mm-hmm.
what I'm most interested in is what happened after that. And what happened was everyone in that group, which was, again, a virtually all white group, gave Connor the benefit of the doubt,
Right.
and consoled him for choking. So meanwhile, everyone in that group showed me contempt. So in other words, I wasn't considered. I wasn't, taken care of. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and in fact, later on that day, I remember this as though it was yesterday, because that's how like traumatic that situation was. But someone in that group, another white guy within that group, came to me later that day and said, "You know what, Teikōa, I'm so glad that you didn't do anything, because I would have put you in your place."
What?
And it's still, to be honest, it's still kind of like, I still have like these visceral reactions to it.
Yeah.
But it was in that moment where I was just like, from 2006 to 2013, I was like, you know what? This is not right. This
Mm-hmm.
is not normal.
Right.
Nobody did anything. And so I was just like, you know what? I had enough. And so the only thing that I knew to do afterwards was to reclaim or reaffirm my humanity. And that
Right.
included actually separating or divorcing from my registered domestic partner, which was painful. It was extremely painful, because I knew I was doing what I had to do, and yet it was still painful because I really loved my husband. And so anyway, so long story short, that happened. We divorced. We got back together. We worked it out.
Mm-hmm.
And
And now you're back together.
And so now we're back together. We're married. We're good. We're doing
Yes.
racism work. But I'd say like that incident, that New Orleans incident, was
Mm-hmm.
something that I'd consider was the catalyst for me like challenging whiteness, or challenging my social conditioning of believing that white is right, and living within that white contempt. So
Right. Well, racism is such a painful topic, especially for the people that experience it on a daily basis. And it's so systemic, even
right.
on how we think about ourselves. And I know growing up for me, like feeling like I wasn't worthy, like I wasn't loved, I was less than. And I had to work a lot on self-love and self-care and compassion for myself, and compassion for others, right? Compassion for the ones that are racist, because a lot of people that are racist in their mindset, not necessarily, we're not talking about white supremacists that are actively racist, but we're talking about people that just don't know that they're actually being racially biased. And it's painful. I mean, so I feel like I had to cultivate a lot of self-love for myself and compassion. And I was just curious on how you, because I know you as a friend, I love you dearly, and I know that you have such a big heart and you really want to help people. So I would really love to hear how you integrate that aspect of compassion in the work that you do on your website, where people can actually go on and study what you're teaching.
Yeah. So again, I don't believe that anything just happens. No, everything happens for a reason. And I don't mean in the what was that book, The Secret or whatever? I don't mean in that way. Like everything happens. Yeah. So everything happens in a context, and that context is a racist society. It is, and by the way, racism is a symptom of race, and race was created to separate us and to disconnect us from our humanity, and white people from their moral humanity. And so the context in which we all live in is white supremacy. And so what I can tell you is that I knew that when I started this process that I wasn't going to be able to talk to or be able to connect with people unless I was able to hold a mirror to myself and reflect on how I've internalized white supremacy. I mean, it's different from white people. I as a person of color don't hold the same systemic, or my group doesn't hold the same systemic control as white people do. But we're still affected by it. We're still influenced by white supremacy. And so, again, so my approach with BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, is one of empathy and love, because I know exactly what it feels like to feel unworthy, and to buy into that, that advertising, if you will. Whereas with white people, for example, like I'll show white people love too, but I mean, I'll also show firm accountability. So my, anti-racism and anti-racism messages may not be palatable all the time, but I honestly think that anti-racism is liberating. It liberates BIPOC, and it also liberates white people from that, inherited historical guilt, from the shackles of shame, as so to speak, as I've said before. So it's liberating for everyone.
Are you back?
Yeah.
Yeah, my like I almost never have internet problems, and of course, the day I go live, people call me. I'm having internet issues. I'm like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yeah, my partner's trying to fix it, but I'm just on cellular data at this point, so hopefully it'll stay on.
Yeah. So yeah, how much of that did you hear? It's sort of.
Yeah, I heard all of it. I just paused for 1 second.
Okay.
So one of the things I also wanted to ask you is for you to talk about your name, because you changed your name, and it's also part of your messaging and part of your story, and I love for you to talk about that too.
Yeah. So I actually talk about this in my Am I Racist video, which everyone can find on my website, Teikōa.com. And so in Am I Racist, which is essentially a rhetorical exercise in which I use the earth as a metaphor for tackling the insidious layers of racism. In that video, I actually reveal how I've internalized racism, or how racism has worked through me. And so Teikōa is actually a stage name, but my birth name used to be Jose Leal, and I changed it to, so it sounded like a foreign sounding name, and at the time, and so I changed it to Joey Pierre. So I changed it to a white European or a white European sounding one. But again, it's been a painful process, but it's also been a healing one, because now I have the language to be able to articulate, so this is what racism is. This is how insidious it is. And this is how it's moved through me. And I don't want it to. And so I want to remove that, and I want to reaffirm my humanity and love myself, so that way I can be able to show up for people and show up from a place of empathy and love. So.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the key to healing anything, right? It's just healing yourself first and finding your own self-love and how you could love yourself more, how you could love the people around you more, and then really pouring that love into the work you do. And I feel like people will receive it, because anti-racism is tough work, I mean, for people to listen to, but I feel like infusing it with love and compassion and empathy really makes it more palatable for people, and for people to really start ingesting it in a very calm, peaceful way that can really start to influence their thinking and help shift them to think more humanitarily. Just think more. We're all humans, and there's no need for this divide that we've created. Well, not us, but the world.
Yeah. So Yeah, what I love about anti-racism is that it's the complete opposite to racism. You know, as I mentioned earlier, racism is a symptom of race. Excuse me. And race was created to separate us and to disconnect us from our humanity, whereas anti-racism actually reclaims it. And
Hmm.
so, um, what drives what drives me um, in the work is this notion of healing. And actually, I think that's exactly what anti-racism is
Right.
is healing.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
healing. It's healing from, you know, the racial trauma. It's healing from the false internalized white superiority. It's healing
Mhm.
from white supremacy. And so the great thing about healing is that healing is for everyone. Healing
Right.
is part of the human condition. It's part of human life. Um, and so uh, uh, I lost my train of thought, but so yeah, healing is inevitable. It can be painful, but it's liberating. So
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely liberating. I feel like once you're able to come to peace within yourself about race and how you feel about yourself, it totally shifts how you even communicate with other people that even that are racist, because you're not as wounded, right? Because
right,
you're healed as much as you can heal on your own,
right,
um, because you're not as triggered. So somebody will say something to me about my hair or my skin, and I'm just like, yeah, that's
yeah,
my hair. Like I,
right,
whereas years before, like I had people when I was a few years ago, I worked at this travel agency, and they were all older white women,
hmm,
and one of the women there was super sweet. Like I still, she's a British woman, very nice, and I was sitting at the table eating lunch, and she started petting me, like
oh,
legit,
oh.
like, oh my God, your skin, it's so soft.
Yeah,
I mean, I kind of was like, yeah, it's a lot of cocoa butter. Like, I mean, and at the time, one of the other women was like, she's not a dog. You can stop petting
right,
her. And the other white woman at the table said that. And at the time, I was just like, okay, like I wasn't truly offended because I know she's a good person, but it's one of those moments where you're just like, you would never do that to your white friend,
yeah,
ever. And it was one of those places where I really had to have compassion for her because I was just like, she just really doesn't know. She's just curious, like, and I was in New Zealand last year, and it was a similar thing where I was at a religious cult where they
mhm.
were all white, super religious people, and I swear I don't think they've ever seen a black person in their life. And my God, it was so interesting. Like the people would just stare at me. And since they were this religious cult, women had to wear their hair long. Like all women had to have long hair. It was part of the rules. And
Right,
so they would ask me, they're like, well, what do you do with your hair? Like, does it get long? Like, how do you have long hair? And I was like, it just grows out, not down. So it
right,
is long. It's just the other direction.
right,
Like I had to explain all these things, and they were like they were asking me questions that I swear to you, if they had asked me that 10 years ago, I would have been livid. But because I've done all this work on myself, I was really just patient. I mean, they didn't really know the difference between Africa and America and like where I was from, and my parents are African, so they're like, "Oh, your parents are African." Oh, and because they're on a cult and they don't watch TV, they only get limited images of what Africa is, and
right,
legitimately they were like, "Oh, your parents were like running around with their bellies out all naked." And
right.
like they just had no concept, and I couldn't even get mad at them. I was just like, "You just don't know.
Right.
You really don't
Well,
know." So,
yeah. So that's the difficult part, though, is that it doesn't racism is a system that influences us from the top down, and so
mhm,
um, everybody, so every white person, unfortunately, has a racist internalized view of the world. And so,
mhm,
and that comes out as bias, as you were just, as you were just pointing out. People touching your hair, and people have touched my hair too. Yeah, this idea of dehumanizing, people, dehumanizing, and especially dehumanizing Black people. Like, I honestly feel like the way I articulate it is that I feel like I've been engaged in a social contract with white people, which I did not sign and did not consent to. And
Mm,
so, but that is unfortunately what we're up against. And that's because again, it's internalized from the top down. So it doesn't, white people's goodness is irrelevant because again, white does not exist without black and vice versa. So, and
mhm,
white, the, white supremacy is essentially the history of consolidating power, resources, labor at the expense of other people. So, and that history, that unaddressed history, by the way, is still plaguing us today. So, which is why you get, again, which is why you have people with biased behavior where they dehumanize people and touch people's hair, which is why you have, biased language, like
mhm.
black on black violence, or oh, you look so exotic, like,
Oh
you
my
know,
God, that was the story of my life. You know how many people have told me that in my life?
yeah,
You look
oh
so
my
exotic. I used to get,
God.
I mean, and part of it was, and it's honestly, I've gotten that mostly from Black people, like you look exotic. And I think it's because since I'm African, my parents are African, I don't necessarily look like Black Americans.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't really notice that until I went to Paris and I went to the area of Paris where there's a lot of Africans. And I literally was walking around like, oh my God, everyone could be related. I felt like I saw my cousins everywhere. I was like, oh, wow, I look like everyone. And
Uh-huh.
it felt really different than when I'm in America. But still, the exotic comment is just like endless. I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, I've just embraced it. I'm just like, fine. I'm a mango. I love mangoes.
Yeah.
I'm
Nope.
cool with it. But
Yeah.
it took a while to just like not get so triggered by the fact that I was different because I felt so different from the Black community
Hmm.
that it was painful. Because I remember I mentioned to you I mentioned to you that I had mostly racist, not racist, but I was treated poorly because I was so dark by other Black people,
Yeah.
and so the exotic comment was always so painful. It was always like, um, and
Yeah.
then eventually I again went back to loving myself, loving my skin, being super appreciative of my melanin, especially as I get older and the sun
Yeah.
has hit my skin and I don't get these wrinkles. I'm
Yes.
very happy with my
Yeah.
skin tone, but it took, I would say, probably 35 years for me to really embrace the color of my skin. And it was a lot, it was painful.
Yeah.
So I had to embrace all of it, the exotic, all of it.
Yeah. Well, see, yeah. And that language, by the way, is deeply, that's what I'm talking about, how, we can trace history into the present and vice versa,
Hmm.
because that language, the language of, calling people exotic, like food is exotic, objects are exotic. People are
Right.
not exotic. But that language stems from colonization, which stems from, this idea of white supremacy. Um,
Hmm.
uh, because the Spanish actually used that same word to categorize the natives. Oh, these exotic, wild beings over here, just galloping into the woods or whatever. Like what? Um, but
Yeah.
yeah. So anti-racism though is racism. As I've said, racism disconnects us from our humanity, and anti-racism reaffirms the humanity of BIPOC and reclaims the moral humanity of white people. So
Hmm.
everybody benefits.
Hmm.
Everybody benefits. So,
So, on a little side note,
mhm.
what would you say? Because this is the Infinite Love Show, so I wanted to ask you, what do you love, like besides your work and your partner
Yeah,
and your husband? I mean, but like, what else do you love about life, and what
yeah,
do you do to express that in your daily life?
yeah. So that's a great question. I think what I love, or rather, what I love about life is that it's a journey. It's, I don't like this idea of life being a race where, by 21, I have to graduate college. By
Hmm.
30, I have to be, making a six-figure salary. By 40, I have to write a book. And so again, I feel like life is a journey, and life is about the quality versus the quantity. The quantity of things, uh, the quantity of how many things accomplished. That shouldn't be the measure for
Hmm.
life. So I love the idea that, or rather, I love the experience where nothing goes as planned. Like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, like
Yeah.
I remember, for example, like I was really great at soccer,
Hmm.
and I remember receiving a letter, I think a couple letters when I was like, preteens, and I was invited to, represent the U.S. in Hungary, Australia, and Germany, and a couple other countries. But I ended up fracturing. It sounds so silly, but I ended up fracturing my left toe, and it
Hmm.
was just I couldn't I couldn't play the same because I was just or just always in my head, just thinking about, fearful that someone was going to break my toe.
Hmm.
Um, and so anyway, so my point is that my soccer career didn't, take off and didn't go where I wanted to because, of psychological barriers, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, so yeah, so life does not go as planned. And I think that's the beauty of it,
Yeah.
is that it's organic.
Right. I mean, I always say there's my plan and then there's God's plan, and it's not always the same. Like
Yes.
I mean, it really isn't. Like growing up in New York City, I would have never ever thought I would be an acupuncturist and live in California. That just was never part of the plan. Like I
Yeah.
was going to move to Italy and become an international lawyer and live in Switzerland
Yes.
in a big
Yes.
mansion. Have a
Well,
house in Monte Carlo.
yes. But you know what? Now you're living your best life in Lafayette.
I I am living my best life here. I love it. I love it out here in the East Bay in California.
Yeah.
So I have a Q&A question. And the
Yep.
question is, what do you say about racism, not just by whites, but by other races?
Um, well, if I understand the question correctly, so racism, again, the thing about racism is that if you the reason why I love history is that it informs us. Like, again,
Hmm.
everything happens in a context. And if you don't know your history, then you won't be able to understand the current conditions of the present, and where we need to go in the future. And
Hmm.
so racism is a symptom of race, and race was created by essentially by elite white men in this country, and that was in an effort to consolidate power. And so, to sum that all up, racism, yes, can, black or indigenous or other people of color say racist things, yes, but however, racism is uh, racism evolves when you have institutional control and you can represent and spit out a specific image. And so the image that we see constantly is white faces, white bodies, white politics. And so white people hold a disproportionate control over our media, government, education. And so
Hmm.
that has an effect on people. It's racism is internalized differently by white people than it is by people of color. People of color, like myself, for example, I internalized racism as like, oh, I'm not like that, and so I must be inferior. Whereas
Hmm.
with whereas with white people see themselves in every aspect of society, and so
Right.
that has a psychological effect
Hmm.
that is internalized as racial superiority. So it's not the same because racism elevates white people over every other color, and especially black. So
So then it's really more of a colorism or one race thinking that they're better, because there are situations where like in Africa, where my parents are from Guinea, and my mom's race is more light skinned, and so when they were colonized by the French, they were given more power because they looked more European,
yeah,
right, than the other races that were darker and had more African like features, and that created a war between them. I mean, they're still at wars today. And that was what, over 70, 80 years ago. And so there is a system where it's ingrained within us, the people of color. So we stay divided.
Right.
And even like Asians not liking black people or black people not liking Mexicans, you know, and they just like, we're all fighting.
Yeah.
And it's so disheartening for me because I'm like, what are we fighting about? Like,
But
we're staying divided, and
yeah.
we're still, both of us we're all in the same category,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
see, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the argument that, uh, BIPOC people can be racist too, because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, if you look at the, again, so my specialty is bias, and my specialty
Hmm.
is rhetoric analysis, or discourse analysis. And so I analyze language. And
Hmm.
so if you look at what racism does is it functions the same way. And that function is to elevate white people, to elevate whiteness, which is why colorism, for example, is a symptom of racism. So
It is.
colorism would not exist, and and racism among BIPOC would not exist if race did not exist. And
Yeah.
so race created racism, and race elevates whiteness. So this idea that this idea of reverse racism essentially is what that question is telling me is just not, it's fallacious, to be honest, and specious at best.
Yeah, but that's not, I mean, it's true on an intellectual level, but on a heart level, it doesn't always translate because you still feel shunned. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the question is coming from a point of pain when you're considered less than from other people, and regardless of who they are, you know, or like if a black guy is treating an Asian man poorly just because he's Asian, and there's a stereotype about Asian men that they're weak, and now you have this black dude overpowering him.
Yeah.
And it's that feeling of like, wow, not only do I have white people to deal with, now I have to deal with everyone else treating me like shit because of this stereotype.
And
Um,
yeah.
and
And
that's kind of, and so it's racism as a big umbrella, but on a day-to-day level, it's really painful.
yeah. And so even that image, as Asian men as feminine and weak, that
Hmm.
image was created by the white people at the top, the
Of
white people
course.
media at the top, who are spitting
Hmm.
that image. And so again, it functions, that argument of reverse racism, or racism among BIPOC. It functions beautifully because it masks the real issue, and the real issue is that racism serves to elevate white people and whiteness. And so, sure, we can be all, like you and I can be bickering, like, be here back and forth, but at the end of the day, that serves to elevate whiteness.
Right.
So
Yeah.
white
Di-
features. Yeah,
Divide and conquer. Divide and
exactly. Yeah.
conquer.
So
Yeah. And that's kind of why I really think it's important to start with loving thyself, because I find the more you can fall in love with yourself, the more you can come to peace with yourself, that really starts to translate on how you start treating other people, because you
yeah,
treat people the way you want to be treated.
right.
Ultimately, like treating people with kindness, with compassion, with empathy, because that's how you want to be treated. And I feel like that starts to shift the way you are in the world, and that's how people start to receive you, and that's how way people start to treat you.
Right.
Like just as simple as walking down the street and smiling at people. I mean, that makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
Like I live in a very, very, very white area, and you'd be surprised when you're just walking down the street smiling at an old white man. He'll smile back.
Yeah. But
He may not talk to me,
right.
but he smiles, kind
Yeah.
of thing.
So yeah, one of the last things that I want to leave everyone with, but particularly white people, is that your success in anti-racism work will not only will not only be measured by how many corrective individual acts you make, but also every missed opportunity. And
Mhm.
so if you engage in anti-racism work, you need to ask yourself, why am I doing this work? Because if you can't answer that, then you're not going to have a good foundation to carry on in anti-racism work. So
Okay. And where can people find your information to start studying your anti-racism work that they can really start to dive deep?
Yeah, so again, you can go to Teikōa.com. You can visit my Instagram. The link is in my bio. And a 20-minute video on the homepage. And I also have a list of I have a resource tab, which includes, the works of other people who are engaged in the work. And actually, and one last
Mm-hmm.
thing, I'm just one person involved in anti-racism work. However, I encourage people who want to get involved to listen to Black women, because Black women are the ones who are leading the movement and leading the charge. So listen to, listen to the Black women in your life. And that's if, by the way, if you have any, because racism has done a good job at segregating us.
Mm-hmm.
And so listen to Black women, elevate Black women's voices, because they are the ones that are leading the charge. So I will end with that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the first episode of the Infinite Love Show. Again, my name is Corinne Camara, and my IG is Pelvis Wellness, and I am an acupuncturist and a energy medicine practitioner. And you can find more information about who I am on my website, pelviswellnessmethod.com. I also offer free bi-monthly healings. My next healing is in 2 weeks, and it's on May 26th, and it's called Balance Your Nervous System, which is really vital right now for most of us that are nervous and anxious and uncertain about the times. It'll be a really nice hour meditative session. And I'm also doing one May 31st with a few other ladies, and it's called Tapping into Your Sacral Power, about cleansing your root chakra. And I'll be doing more free healings as the months go on. You can also go on my website if you want to get a free online energy reading, which I will tell you a little bit about when you sign on to that. And yeah, so that's everything about me. I love you all. Thank you so much for hopping on this IG Live. This is the first, so sorry for the technical difficulties. I will get better. And thank you, Teikōa. I love you so much, and I love the work that you're doing, and I am so supportive, and I want to tell everybody about it because I think it's such important work, and we all need more healing around race for ourselves, but also helping the world at large. So
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love you so much.
Bye, honey.
All right. Bye.